Welcome to From the Basement Up. And today I'm speaking with Isabel Last, the founder and CEO of Faena, a Spanish language learning video game where she's making learning fun. In Faena, you learn by doing and play to survive and thrive in a simulated world where you can interact in a meaningful way. This game fills a space that is long overdue. Through a narrative-based game, it hooks players into learning without even realizing it. Isabel is creating a paradigm shift where we can all learn how to speak a second language. Hello, Isabel. Thank you so much for joining us today on From the Basement Up.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is great. So, well, first, before we jump in, I want to find out about you and your background.
Sure. Yeah, of course. So I'm Isabel Last, like you said. I was born and mostly raised in Baltimore, Maryland on the East Coast. And there I went to Towson University to get my Spanish as a second language teaching certification. And I taught middle school and high school levels. And when I was teaching, I would get really nervous to be in front of so many students. And it was my first public speaking experience. And it was really hard. I would get cotton mouth. That's why I always have water, even now, even though I'm more experienced with it.
I do too. Don't worry.
Yeah, really, you get stuck. But so I was so nervous to be in front of so many students day after day. So I had to make lessons that would put them at the center stage instead of me. And then it would take everything off me. And I also found that it was a lot more successful when the students were doing most of the intellectual work, not the teacher. So this is something sometimes referred to as a flipped classroom technique. And the way that I went about it was just for my own health. But then I realized it was really, really nice, and it got them to be a lot more active. And once I did that, then I got into an epoch where I was starting to get really bored. So in order to entertain myself and the students, I would make these crazy mystery lessons about solving Bad Bunny's mysterious death at an opera, and Maluma and Osuna were involved. You have to go through all these materials that talk to each other and figure out who did it. So things like that. And then I moved out to New Mexico. So I'm in New Mexico right now to do a master's in Hispanic linguistics at UNM, University of New Mexico. And I was teaching Spanish 1 and 3. And again, I was doing my best to make it as fun, entertaining, and flipped as possible. But I realized that there had to be a better way to do this, because I can make a murder mystery about Bad Bunny and a bunch of other stuff, but I still have to do it in a classroom with chairs, with papers, with documents. And on Zoom, it was just the same, but digitized. And many students just wouldn't show up. It wasn't working well. And they wouldn't turn assignments in, and I would meet with them and I would see that they're very interested. They want to learn this, but just, I was stuck in this paradigm that I felt that I had reached the ceiling of. As creative of a person as I am, as entertaining as I made it, I did all of the pedagogical right practices. And even then I knew that whatever this is, whatever paradigm that we're in, it needs a change, it needs a shift. So at the same time, I was also noticing that many of my students were just playing video games. And that's where the idea for, they wouldn't come to my class. And I'd be like, hey, where were you? And they'd be like, oh, sorry, I was playing Minecraft.
Oh,
and okay. But instead of saying oh, you have to come to class, I thought, well, that makes sense. Video games are really fun. Yes. So what if I took everything that I was doing in my lessons and I made the entire immersive world from the ground up, where it made sense to learn these phrases and chunks according to a given social situation. So everything was all contextualized in one overarching sci-fi story. So it'd be the murder of Bad Bunny, and then that's just one in a series of you being a detective, something like that. So where you could also focus on speaking, because you're using your own literal voice in the video games. It's all voice recognition based. And you just learn and interact with characters in the game. And so to basically sum up, from Baltimore, but now I'm over here. I left that master's program to do this full time. So I'm working on Faena full time. That's going to make all these immersive video games for all languages, full time now, full startup mode. Again, it's called Faena. But yeah, that's basically where I'm coming from.
That is awesome. Okay, I just have to ask: was this taking place during COVID, where we were on Zoom and teachers were trying? Okay, so do you think that was kind of? I'm always interested to find out what's going to happen and how are we evolving from COVID and all of us working and living from home. So this was the evolution of your lesson. So was this one of it, or had you thought about it before?
I hadn't thought about it before. I think that probably was a big push, was seeing all of my materials actually worked really well online. It wasn't the same kind of classroom experience where you get everyone talking and you can, it's a bit more energetic when you're in person, but I saw that it was working, but then people just weren't show up. And so you need to do something that would get into their minds, into their needs and their interests, instead of forcing them to just participate in this paradigm that's just worked for very few people, that are going to succeed anyway in whatever they do. So yeah,
it's brilliant. So smart. I have to ask because I don't speak Spanish. What does Faena mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a great question. I get this ever so often. Faena in Spanish it means different things in different dialects. So the way that I learned it was in a language, culture, and politics class of the Andes. So we were looking at the Quechua and the Aymara indigenous communities there. And Faena in that context, and the way that I learned, meant work that you do towards the collective well-being of a community. So that's what we're taking. So in the game, faenas are like these little missions, these little quests that you do, and they're all like asking people what they need. Are you okay? Okay, you need this, let me go make it. You have to go find the resources, pull it back, ask people where certain things are, and so all of those have to do with faenas. And then Faena, the game takes place in like a retro-futuristic Colombian Andes. And my husband's Colombian, and so that's where the whole Colombian aspect is coming from. So I'm trying to be as loving towards all of these Colombian symbolisms as possible. And so Faena, to them, I was asking around all my husband's like cousins and friends, and it was again like a really wide variety even within Colombia. To my husband, who's from more like a rural region in like near the Amazons in the south of Colombia. To them, Faena was like a day of work that you, for like farmers. It's like, oh, I have to do my Faena today. And then his other friends were like, oh, Faena is like a big party. And then someone else is like, oh, Faena is a big problem. Like, oh, I was in this situation, I was in this Faena. And so Faena means everything, essentially. It's a good word.
Is it? But you know what? It sounds like for the most part, it has a positive spin. And so that's a good thing.
I think it's split down the middle because
really?
Also in Spain, I had a professor from Spain, so I was asking her what faena meant, and they have a phrase like, "Oh, que faena," which is like, like what a faena, which means like, oh, it's a lot of work that they don't want to do. So I think it's split down the middle, but I think that's part of a lot of the it's part of the larger narrative and the value systems that we're trying to kind of elicit in Faena. A lot of it has to do with collectivism and like needing to do this work for the good of everyone, in order for everyone as a whole to survive.
But I love that, for the good of everyone. And it sounds like you're kind of thinking about adding kind of a moral compass in there as well, in addition to learning. So moms are going to love it, and I'll be honest, I'm going to love it.
No, yeah, it's super exciting. Yeah, there's a bunch of moral stuff in there. It has a lot to do with like the role of humans in relation to the environment at large. Yeah, I can't reveal too much past that.
Okay, no,
there's a bunch of it. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So we have a lot to unpack, and I'm excited. So explain to me. So when did this idea came over COVID? And I'm not a techie person. I have no idea how to get something like this started. I mean, this is a huge thing. How do you start something like this?
I think I'm very stubborn and at times ignorant. And so I just put my head down and just decided that I would do it. And then from that point, then you just figure it out. I think I've been noticing a lot when I try to find like people to bring onto my team. Startups are not for everyone. And I think I didn't realize how much I was kind of like born into it in some sort of way. Like, because most of my parents were small business owners at one point in their lives. My mom was a florist for her whole entire life. My dad used to work in construction in England and had his own company. And I think there's a lot of like, I didn't realize how much it's not that pervasive that people have this trait of just being stubborn enough and just like, if you have an idea and you just like Nike, just do it. Like you just kind of go do it. So it's been difficult. The learning curve is very hard. Again, I'm not technical either. I don't know how to make these games. I think with my teaching experience and the way that I was organizing lessons, a lot of that is actually has a lot of parallels to game design.
Nice.
Kind of creating these experiences for people to play. And so it's been very interesting. It has been hard, but it's just this thing of just put your head down and do it, because it's fun and it's interesting, and it's a good challenge, and it's way more challenging than anything else I've done.
Yes. So you're finding that you're kind of writing the script out of what you want the people to learn, and then you're finding the game developers to come in and make that happen for you.
Yeah.
How hard has it been to find those programmers or game designers?
They're there. There's a bunch. I recently lost my team that I was working with. They were very contractual, and I was hoping that they would kind of take the initiative and step up and want to come on full time as we're getting closer to being fully funded when I launched the round. Right now it's been like part-time, whatever small amounts of funding that we get in. So that didn't work out. So recently, like a couple of weeks ago, I had to do a search to get what I always wanted, which was like a partner, a technical partner that has experience in game dev and design as well, ideally. And I found someone now, and we're working really well together. It'll be funny. Hopefully by the time this comes out, we're still together. But it's been very easy to find people with the skills. It's been a lot harder to find people with the personality and
they share the excitement that you have.
And that are willing to take this risk too, because I think that's a big thing, is like people are different. It just has to be very well aligned, and all of these things you can't control. You can control, like, do you have the skills to pull this off for the most part? Are you willing to learn a bunch of other skills? Because in startups, it's in such early stage, everyone's going to be wearing a bunch of hats, and you have to be willing to push yourself to just learn other things as the need arises. So that's been harder to do, but the skills are definitely out there all over the world, and we're all remote too. So that's made it a lot easier.
Yes. Since COVID, we started working remotely where people can. And it actually has been wonderful. It has been wonderful. It just makes everything so much more flexible and in a lot of ways easier. And then people are able to kind of focus in their space. So I have found that it's been great. So I'm curious here, what is the timeline for this? And I'm so glad that you're on today and talking about it, because we're actually talking before it goes live. So this is super exciting. Like, you're in the beta phase and everything. I can't wait to hear how you're rolling this out and how it's going to launch.
Yeah, so we're quite a ways from it, unfortunately. Video games and the scale that we want to pull off. I wanted originally to make like a 40-hour game, which it takes like multi-millions of dollars, like $10 million or something, to make like these big AAA 40-hour games. And so I was convinced down to 10. So we're going to do 10-hour game installments. The first hour of which, so 1/10 of one of the games, would be released 18 months, or if we hit a shorter benchmark, then it would be slightly sooner than that, after we get fully funded, which should be within the next few months. So we're hoping to raise and start our pre-seed or seed round either early December or January.
So how are you funding? Because this is something that I bootstrapped, and I always find it fascinating when people, because this is a huge thing. This is massive. How do you go about the funding aspect?
So some of it's my own money, wherever, whenever it's needed. So, and I've been foregoing like an income too, and none of the money goes to me at all, in no sense. We've gotten 32K around in investments or 32K in funding total, the majority of which are investments, like small little, like 10K, 6K little investments, down to 1K even, from various people, some personal connections, some pitch competitions, some most notably, I don't know if you know of Notion, that's blowing up right now, but the CTO and the CEO of Notion have done these small, like little micro investments in us. Basically anything, it all helps as we try to get a demo out to be able to launch our round, so that investors can play and show that we can make stuff.
That's so very cool. Like, do you already have customer service on board? Is it more you? And then how are you building out your team? Can you see it like once the funding is done?
Yeah, so I'm actually making those bigger budgets now that I know that it wasn't going to work with too many contractors.
Okay.
Because you can build something out, but you can hire people to build you a game, but they're not going to work with you on like iteration and exploration and all this brainstorming, and all of that needs to happen because I don't have all of the skills to pull this off. I have the language learning aspect, I have some game design skills, and past that, it needs to be a team. So the person that I found right now should end up being my number two. And if not, I'll keep looking. But we basically want like 2 to 3 co-founders. We want this to be as small as possible. So ideally 2. We need all of us to wear as many hats as possible.
Sure.
And have as many different skills as possible. So yeah, we are basically, we need that core team of 2 to 3 people to cover, like, I would be language learning, one would be development, like back-end stuff, and then the third one would be art. So they have to cover like the entire art pipeline. I actually cover it right now, the beginnings of it, and then I'd have to hand it off because I don't have like the 3D modeling skills, but I've actually been using a bunch of AI engines to help me with concept art, and this is really, really, really cool.
You've been creating the artwork so far?
Not all. I create everything that gets handed off, or that was handed off to artists. I have a tight handle on what they're making because I'm an artist myself, so I really care about what it looks like. Over my dead body, will this look bad? Like, so it'll be a good looking thing either way. But yeah, so we need that core team, and then the rest would be like contracting out things out that the core team can't cover, as cheap as possible, but also like as good as possible, depending on how much funding we have to allocate.
Because I just see this as something that schools would want to have everywhere across the United States. And have you been approached by anybody about getting this integrated into the school system?
Yes, and I've mostly been bothering the hell out of them. So we got 52K in LOIs in under a week. So these are letters of intent. They're common to kind of show interest into people actually purchasing the game. And we did the LOIs with basically all person connections. I did it under a week, 52K. All these teachers that I know, department chairs, department heads at universities, high schools, middle schools, all across the board. So yeah, eventually we do want this game to be in schools. A lot of our competition, so take apps like Duolingo or Babbel, a lot of the route that they have gone, and a lot of the route that edutainment has gone, which is like gamifying learning and all this stuff, they're making tools to support teachers in the classroom. A big downside to that is that there are no teachers. We have huge teacher shortages across the country, and it doesn't sound safe to me to rely on individuals that have super varied backgrounds in how well they're trained and what they're trained in. And I know this because I work with them, and I've done talks and workshops on how to do this like task-based learning method that I'm like a big proponent of. Yeah, I think the idea would be to have these relationships with department chairs, not so much teachers, because they don't have as much purchasing power as the department heads do. And I know that they're looking for something that could eventually replace teachers because they don't have them. Actually, as I reached out to some of my old like department heads, people that I knew, they were offering me jobs because they're like, oh, by the way, we have a vacancy. Like, can you come do this? And they're like, you can test your game out on your students. Like, we'll let you do whatever. I said, no, I have to do this full time. So yeah, they really, really need people. They really do. Yeah.
That makes me sad. But thank goodness you're doing this, giving that extra support to the students and to the kids out there, and something fun for them to look forward to. As the game evolves and like it's talking to you, I can tell you have a vision. And I'm curious how far out this vision goes, because I know you can see it this year, maybe next year, but I have a feeling you have like a 5 to 10 year vision with this.
Oh, even bigger, actually. Yeah, I would say like at least like 50 years. Yeah, I want Faena to be like on my tombstone, if I have like a tombstone. If I was in the ground. But no, there's definitely a very, very large plan at hand. I can give some indication as to what this is. I'll say that the narrative is being written large enough to encompass, so the world that we're creating, every language that you would learn from whatever. So if you're an English speaker learning Spanish, if you're an Arabic speaker learning Mandarin, all of those games would happen in the same universe. So in the same video game universe. And so it'll be large enough to hold something like a cinematic universe later. Also, if we are able, which I'm very confident, obviously, that we're going to be able to pull this off, but if we're able to pull this off with language, which is arguably one of the most complex, if not the most complex single entity that we can kind of name and fathom, we can pull it off with learning lots of things. So I'll say that. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I can see how this can keep going. That's very, again, it's like as long as you're creating the space where people are having fun while they're learning, why wouldn't they stay? I walk in and my son is playing video games and he loves video games. And the video games he loves are typically some building something or some strategy game or something like that. So he would love this. He would go for this 100%, and for me, I would love it because, he's learning something. So I fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. You're a whole target market segment, actually, are parents that see they're good. I mean, they're going to play anyway, right?
Yeah.
They're like, they might as well learn Spanish.
Exactly. I just love having guests share some of their toughest moments and then the unexpected wins, just because you have to be so flexible and you have to just roll with the punches. So what was the tough moment that you don't mind sharing, or like the biggest lesson that you had to experience?
Sure. Yeah, there have been a bunch, and for sure big punches. And again, it's back to this thing of just being stubborn and almost kind of you can't overthink things too much, because you just have to iterate and get back up again, and you're gonna get another punched again and then fall back down and then get back up again. You have to be, I want to say, almost like dumb enough to do this. Like, yeah, okay, all right, whatever. Don't think about that. Yeah, been a bunch of lessons that I've learned throughout all of this, doing this full time since February. It's been very hard for me to understand who to listen to when I'm being given conflicting pieces of advice on fundraising, on game development, on being a founder, team management, all this sorts of stuff, all of these different things that I have to do. Lots of them are experts on what they are doing specifically and like their own little market or their own startups that they've done before, but Faena hasn't been done before. And so it's been hard to kind of navigate these different pieces of advice. So I would say that the toughest lesson for me has been the cost of time. I really just have to, it's been oscillating between like listening to people and knowing that I need to learn things and from people that have done this before, but then also going back to my instincts of and not allowing too many voices influence my path and Faena's path. So that's been a really hard thing. Yeah.
And the other thing is, there's a lot of times there's more than one way to make something happen. And that's the other thing, and sometimes maybe you do have to find your own path. And I love that you're stubborn and you're going to just make sure that you find it. So you get knocked down and you just have to be flexible and just make sure that you get back up again. So thank you for sharing that. It's a vulnerable place to be, a lot of times when you're working so hard and, finding funding and trying to move forward. So it can be tough. What are some of your wins? Some of the things that you just kind of knocked out of the park?
Yeah, so I think the most obvious answer to this would probably be the investments that we got from Notion's CTO and COO. I think landing them and then their networks are probably going to be what make us make it, as opposed to all these other people that I've been talking to. There's 2 people alone probably going to make this happen. But I think that the biggest one of all was probably just this initial decision to leave my master's program and start working on Faena full time, and just taking a chance on this idea and myself. And so far, so good. I think.
Yes,
but yeah.
So because I watched a couple of your pitches online. I loved it. And I loved how, first your excitement for the product, you see the need, you saw, and you're like, wow, no one's doing this. I'm the person that should be doing this. I should make this happen. There was something in it where you were talking about voice recognition and there's a narrative. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's the game is based on two things. So how we're organizing, or one is the functionality, so it's completely voice recognition based. So in order to advance through the game narrative, which is the way that we're organizing the game, so instead of a syllabus of like AR verbs or like verbs about art, but so you advance through the narrative by talking with your literal voice using voice recognition to characters in the game. So these are called NPCs, non-player characters, everyone other than yourself. So you initiate conversations by approaching them and saying any of the greetings that you're taught in the beginning. And then you just start enacting these chunks and phrases that were modeled for you by your friend Sarelia in the game. She's like your best friend. She's your only English speaker. She saves you. You save her. But you're just talking into your computer. So if you say something so incorrect that the core meaning of what you were supposed to say is lost, then the NPC will like look puzzled and like say something in Spanish like "Ay, te confundía," or like "I'm confused about this," right? And then you'll get to try again. And then as a last resort, if nothing else works, then you'll be allowed to type something in or edit the text that's being output. But we do want this to be mainly a speaking game because that's what's kind of been left behind. So we want to emphasize speaking through the use of this voice recognition system in order for you to learn how to actually speak and interact with real people later, way before reading and writing.
And that is so important. And just, the basics of getting through. So if you were to go on a vacation, the basics of going into a restaurant, things like that, just the very basics of where is the street, where is the restroom, the bathroom. So those types of things. So it is really important. When you have people going through the game, and I know that you're in the beta, how fast do you see them progressing through the game, like passing out worksheets and passing out, conjugation, worksheets for kids to do? When you see people playing through this, how fast are they learning compared to like the standard way of learning?
I've been asked this before. I think we're not going to know exactly how efficient we are being until all the games are out to cover Spanish fluency, and someone plays all of them like back to back. It'll be, each game is about 10 hours. We're like kind of planning for 10 to 16 games to cover Spanish language. And by the time we're on the third game, we would have expanded to start other series too, to cover other languages. Yeah, it's many hours, like 160 hours. So it's 10 hours of narrative in each game, meaning like it's 10 hours of new material. But how quickly you grasp it is up to you. So if you are in this one Faena and you're learning something, and then you don't feel that you're as comfortable with it, and you keep having to look at like the models again or like the scripts, and you don't want to be able to do that because sometimes your scripts get taken away, and so you don't want that to happen. So in order to make sure that you feel comfortable advancing, you can do as many of the side faenas as possible. So like the co-faenas alternas, kind of like side missions, side quests. These aren't necessary to do. So if someone's like kind of quick with things and can understand better, or maybe they've heard all of these phrases before, like maybe their grandma's spoken it to them, and they don't need to spend as much time within a given group of phrases that are for this situation, then they can just advance on pretty quickly. So I would say between like 5 minutes and an hour. Because everyone's different, and they come into the game having different stuff. So some people have taken college courses, they've tried Duolingo, so some words, their parents might have spoken to them a little bit in Spanish, but so they know some stuff but not other stuff. They might be able to recognize a lot but not be able to speak a lot. Those are called like receptive bilinguals. So it's the player and how quickly they kind of get through this will be vastly different for each person. But we'll offer 10 hours, but you can play it forever. Like there'll be unlimited play. You can always go back and do stuff.
Oh, I love that. That's fun. And it's going to be fun enough where kids are going to want to go back and do that too. So I do have just a couple more things.
Yeah.
When you start branching out into other languages, are you going, like, so say you're learning Mandarin, is it going to be in a town like in China? And then you're going to be going through their civilization? Okay, I'm so
yeah. So what we're doing is we're trying to place players in a realistic context in which the things that they would be saying would happen in those environmental context. So every single language that we're going to cover, which hopefully is all of them, so like 6,000 plus, we'll just keep going, and just keep expanding and keep going them. Yeah. So with Mandarin, for example, yeah, it'll be the same retrofuturistic world. So it's a sci-fi world. So it's based in reality, but we have a little bit of leg room to kind of be quite creative, which is what kind of sci-fi allows you to do, is kind of root it in reality, but then take it to another level that's more interesting, it's more enticing, right? So we'll do that. And also all of the speakers that are voicing all of these characters are going to be from these different areas, in order to kind of accurately represent accurately kind of mimic what you would realistically hear if you were in those situations. Now, with this comes a ton of variation, and like an insurmountable amount of variation in terms of what people are going to say. So, for example, with the game now, the first game for English speakers to learn Spanish, it takes place in retrofuturistic Colombia in the mountains in the Andes. And most of the speakers that you're going to be listening to and kind of using to create your own like accent and learn all this stuff will be Colombian speakers from a bunch of different places in Colombia.
Okay.
But we'll throw in some other speakers as well, just to give you the opportunity for your brain to kind of adjust and make sure that you're getting these other dialects. It's a ton of variation. And then as the narrative progresses, we'll move you around. So not the whole Spanish won't take place. The whole Spanish language learning like series won't take place in Colombia. We'll move you around. And then wherever you are, they'll be like, so let's say we'll move you up to some place like a town near Mexico City. Then most of the speakers would then change to being Mexican speakers, and they're all real speakers that we have to go out and record.
Wow, this is very involved and very cool. Very cool. As you're talking, it just keeps rolling up, and I'm like, this is huge. This is huge. So I thank you for I guess starting this and getting this going, because I just think that so many people are going to love it.
Thanks.
I would love to know, what are some phrases? So typically when I wrap things up with a guest, like, you must have a mantra or words that you live by. And I know a couple times you talked about being stubborn, but what are those words or the mantra, or the saying that you have that gets you going after long day, you got to get up in the morning to do it again?
Yeah.
What do you say to yourself?
So I am very into Rick and Morty. Have you seen the show?
I love Rick and Morty. I really
So
do.
good. Oh my gosh, so amazing. I'm very into existentialism. I got that from my dad. I kind of let, when you're in it, you forget the context of why you're doing things. And so it's important to kind of step back and kind of think about why you're doing things and why you're alive at all. But so there's this one quote that Rick says, I don't know if he says it multiple times, but to live is to risk it all. And then it goes on to say, otherwise you're just an inert chunk of randomly assembled molecules drifting wherever the universe blows you. And I really like that. Like, as humans, we have free will. We have this ability to kind of choose certain things within a bunch of constrained context, of course, and a lot of things that we can't control. But to be able to do this and to choose to do this is like, it's a huge risk to me, to my husband. But yeah, to live is to risk it all.
Okay, I love that you quoted Rick.
I love it so much. There's so many things.
Yeah, that is good. Isabel, thank you so much for joining me today. This was so fabulous. I love it. And everyone, Isabel, when should people be looking, and where should they be looking for the website?
So they can look now. So we have when you look up the website, it's just www.faena.cc. So FAENA.cc. The first thing that'll pop up, you can like explore and be convinced by something else, but by the artwork that we have, for example, that's all on there, and on our general aesthetic vibe. But basically the first thing that's going to pop up is this demo waitlist. So you can throw your name on there and be some of the first to try out the game, and understanding that it's like, there are going to be a lot of bugs. I might fail the build, but you just send us feedback, and you get to be one of the first people to try it out. So there's that. And then also to stay updated with everything that we're doing, when we get funding, when we release different pachas, when we release our characters and different concept arts and different models. That's all on our Instagram page. So that's just at Faena Games. And then that way is probably the best way to keep in touch with what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. This is fun.
This was fantastic. And everybody, thanks for joining us today on From the Basement Up. Thank you to our listeners for joining us for today's episode. And thank you to my amazing producer, Emily Flanagan. She deals with all my shenanigans. Julia Augustino, thank you for the amazing composition that you have made for the podcast. And listeners, feel free to check us out on our social media channels. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review. And you can also visit us on FromTheBasementUp.com. Thank you so much.